The Silence Between Calls. Chapter 1. His voice came through the speaker low and uneven, as though he'd recorded the message several times before letting this version remain. "I wasn't sure if this was still your number." That was all he said at first. Leah sat very still on the edge of her bed, the phone cold in her hand, listening to the silence that followed. Some pauses carried more truth than words ever could. Outside her apartment window, rain tapped softly against the glass. It had been raining since late afternoon, the kind of thin October rain that never quite became a storm but managed to settle into everything anyway. The pavement, the rooftops, the spaces between thoughts. Then his voice returned. "I know this is unexpected." Another pause. "There's something I need to tell you." The message ended there. No explanation, no name, but it did not need one. Even after 6 years, Leah would have known his voice anywhere. She replayed it, then again. The third time, she found herself listening not to the words but to everything beneath them. The faint breath before he spoke, the slight strain at the end of the second sentence, the way he hesitated before unexpected, as if he had considered choosing another word and decided there wasn't one. She set the phone down carefully on the blanket beside her, as though any sudden movement might disturb something fragile. For a long moment, she simply stared at the wall across from her bed. The apartment was quiet except for the refrigerator humming in the kitchen and the steady rain against the window. The lamp on her nightstand cast a circle of warm light over the room, catching the stack of papers she had brought home from school to grade that weekend. Essay drafts, half of them still untouched. On any other Friday night, she would have made tea, changed into old sweatpants, and spent 2 careful hours circling awkward thesis statements in red ink. Tonight, she could not seem to remember what any of that was for. Her phone screen had already gone dark. Still, she knew the message was there, waiting, like something unfinished. She stood and crossed to the window, folding her arms tightly against herself. 3 floors below, headlights moved through the wet street. People hurried beneath umbrellas. A couple ducked under the awning of the pharmacy across the block, laughing at something private. The sight of them stirred an ache she hadn't invited. She was not lonely. At least that was what she had learned to tell herself. There was a difference, she discovered, between loneliness and absence. Loneliness demanded to be filled. Absence simply learned how to occupy space. She had become very good at living around absences. The phone buzzed in her hand. A text. For one impossible second, her breath caught. But it was only Nora. "Still alive? You vanished after lunch." Leah stared at the message, then typed back. "Long day. Grading papers." The reply came almost instantly. "You're lying, which means something happened. Call me?" Leah gave the faintest smile. Nora had known her since university and possessed the unsettling ability to hear what Leah was not saying, even through text. She typed, "Tomorrow." 3 dots appeared, then disappeared, then, "Okay. But don't disappear into your own head tonight." Leah set the phone face down. Too late for that. She moved to the kitchen and filled the kettle, watching water strike steel. Her hands were steady, which surprised her. She had imagined, over the years, what it might feel like to hear from him again. Anger, perhaps. Bitterness. A carefully rehearsed indifference. Instead, what she felt was stranger than any of those. Disorientation. As if some internal clock she had long ago stopped listening to had suddenly begun ticking again. She leaned against the counter while the kettle heated. 6 years. Long enough for a person to become someone else. Long enough to forget the exact shade of someone's eyes, the cadence of their laughter, the shape their name once took in your mouth. Or at least that was what she had believed. But hearing his voice had collapsed all that distance in an instant. And with it came memory. Not the dramatic kind. Not the final fight or the sharp words that had ended everything. It was something smaller. A winter evening in their first apartment. Ethan standing at the stove, trying and failing to make risotto because he had refused to follow the recipe. His sleeves rolled to his elbows. Music playing too quietly to identify. The way he had looked over his shoulder and smiled when he caught her watching him. Such an ordinary moment. And somehow the one that hurt most to remember. The kettle whistled. She startled at the sound. Teabag, mug, hot water. The familiar motions helped. She carried the mug back to the bedroom and sat once more on the edge of the bed. The voicemail waited. At the bottom of the screen was his number. She did not recognize it. Her thumb hovered over the call icon. A sensible person would ignore it until morning. A wiser person might delete it altogether. Leah had spent 6 years trying to become both sensible and wise. Slowly, before she could think herself out of it, she pressed call. The line rang once, twice, 3 times. Then his voice, immediate and real. Leah. For a second she couldn't speak. Rain moved softly against the window. On the other end of the line, his breathing caught as though he, too, had not quite believed this moment would happen. And when she finally found her voice, the only thing she managed to say was the question she had been carrying for 6 years. Why now? Chapter 2. For a moment, there was only silence. Not the empty kind. The kind that arrived when 2 people were suddenly standing inside the same memory, uncertain what could safely be said there. Then Ethan exhaled. It was a small sound, rough at the edges. I wasn't sure you'd answer. Leah looked down at the tea cooling between her hands. Neither had she. The rain had grown steadier outside, brushing against the glass in restless waves. Somewhere in the apartment above hers, footsteps crossed the floor, then faded. The ordinary sounds of other people continuing with their evening. It felt strange that the world could remain so unchanged while hers had tilted so sharply. You didn't answer my question, she said. Her voice came out steadier than she felt. Another pause. I know. He sounded tired. Not the theatrical kind of tiredness people announce to invite concern. Something quieter, deeper. The sound of a person who had been carrying too much for too long. I'm sorry, he said. The words landed between them carefully, as if he understood apology was no longer a thing to be offered lightly. Leah closed her eyes. 6 years ago, she had imagined this conversation 100 different ways. In some versions, she was angry. In others, composed to the point of coldness. Sometimes she said exactly the right thing. Something precise and cutting that would leave him silent with regret. But now that the moment had come, none of those rehearsed selves appeared. All she felt was the strange, exhausting effort of holding herself still. Why now? She repeated. This time he answered. My mother died in March. Leah's fingers tightened around the mug. For a second she said nothing. She had known his mother well enough to picture her immediately. Margaret Hale, with her carefully pinned silver hair and the habit of straightening picture frames whenever she entered a room. She had always spoken to Leah with formal kindness, as if warmth were something she offered in measured portions. Still, Leah remembered the afternoon Margaret had shown up at their apartment with homemade soup when Leah had been too sick to leave bed. She remembered how she had set the container on the kitchen counter and said, without meeting Leah's eyes, "You look pale. Eat all of it." It had been the closest thing to affection Leah had ever received from her. I didn't know, Leah said quietly. There wasn't anyone to tell you. The simplicity of it stung. No accusation, just fact. She looked toward the rain-dark window. Was it sudden? No. Cancer. He hesitated. She was sick for almost a year. Leah felt a flicker of shame she could not quite explain. A year. An entire year of hospital visits and test results and difficult conversations, and she had moved through her own life unaware. Teaching classes, meeting Nora for coffee, complaining about grading papers, existing in a world where Ethan's mother was still alive because she had never been told otherwise. I'm sorry, she said. Thank you. His voice softened, and for the first time she heard something familiar in it. The slight drop in tone he'd always had when emotion caught him off guard. He used to sound that way late at night, when they spoke in the dark about things that felt too vulnerable for daylight. Leah pushed the thought aside. This still doesn't explain why you called. No. The word came quickly, as if he had expected the challenge. Then he was quiet long enough that she wondered if he might not answer at all. When he finally spoke, his voice had changed. There was tension in it now. Measured, deliberate. Before she died, she gave me something. Leah waited. A box of my father's things. His father had died when Ethan was 12. Leah knew the broad outline of that loss but very little beyond it. Ethan rarely spoke about him, and whenever he did, his words carried the clipped carefulness of someone navigating ground they preferred not to revisit. There were letters in it, he continued. Old papers. Photographs. He stopped. And one of them was for you. Leah frowned. For me? Yes. That doesn't make any sense. I know. She sat straighter on the bed. The room suddenly felt smaller. What kind of letter? I haven't read all of it. The answer was too quick, too controlled. Leah heard what he wasn't saying. You have read some of it. He exhaled. Yes. And another pause. This one different. Heavy. I think we need to talk in person. Leah let out a short, humorless laugh. No. The word surprised even her. It emerged instinctively from somewhere older than reason. Leah, you disappear for 6 years, call out of nowhere, tell me your mother died, and then ask to see me because of some letter your dead father left behind? That's not what I'm asking. Then what are you asking? His silence stretched. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter. I'm asking for 1 hour. She stared at the darkened screen, though she could no longer see her reflection there. 1 hour. It sounded harmless, manageable, the kind of request reasonable people granted. And yet she knew enough about history to understand that life rarely changed all at once. It shifted through small permissions. 1 answered phone call, 1 agreed meeting, 1 hour. Outside, a siren wailed faintly somewhere across the city, then dissolved into distance. Leah thought of the life she had built from careful routines and modest certainties. The school, her apartment, Sunday mornings with Nora at the cafe on Hawthorne Street. The peace she had assembled piece by piece after Ethan left. She thought of how fragile peace could be, and still, beneath all of it, another feeling moved. Curiosity, not about the letter, about him, who he had become, whether the years had altered him as deeply as they had altered her. She hated that curiosity. More than that, she hated that it still had power. When? She asked. The relief in his silence was immediate. Tomorrow. Public place. Of course. She hesitated. Then, the cafe on Mercer. 11. I'll be there. Neither of them moved to end the call. Leah could hear his breathing. Steady now, as though some private tension had eased. And suddenly she was struck by the unbearable intimacy of that sound. This man, once as familiar to her as her own reflection, now reduced to breath moving through a telephone line. Leah. His voice was careful. Yes. There was a long pause. When he finally spoke, his words were almost lost beneath the rain. You sound exactly the same. Something in her chest tightened. She ended the call before she could answer. For a long time, she sat motionless on the edge of the bed, the silent phone still in her hand. Then she looked at the clock. 11:47. Less than 12 hours until morning. And though exhaustion pressed at her bones, she already knew she would not sleep, because for the first time in 6 years, tomorrow had begun to feel like the past.